initiative in this community that's moving forward on many fronts, trying to improve this community. Help us to be a partner in that. Help us to do that with be your will and to make good decisions. Thank you for everybody who participates in this process. Guide us, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. You have before you a proposed agenda. Does anyone have any additions to the agenda?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell.
I want to add to unfinished business new grinder pump policy, under unfinished, and then under new business. You know what, I'm gonna leave that new business alone because John is working with me. Well, I'm gonna bring it up. Commercial customer online payment limitation, fix. That's it.
Okay. I have item 13A and 14A. Anyone else?
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
As 14B, I would request a topic of developer suggestion.
Developer suggestion, okay. Let's see, no others. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as amended?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please vote. And it passes 5-0. There are no public hearings. The next item is open forum, and I have 2 pink slips for the open forum. If you wish to address us in open forum and have not done so, get a pink slip from the desk over there and fill it out. The first person to address us is Mr. Adam Cobb. And Mr. Cobb, if you'll come up here and press the speak button.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you briefly. I've got some handouts I'd like to give you, if I might, before I get started.
Certainly.
Hopefully help what I'm saying make it more sense as possible. Thank you. So, first off, I'd like to thank each of you. I believe I've talked or corresponded with each of you directly. I appreciate your accessibility, your responsiveness, and your willingness to talk about some of your citizens' concerns. So I find that unique, and I truly do appreciate it. I'm Adam Cobb, and I represent WFIUWF LLC. It is an entity that owns College View Apartments out by the University of West Florida. I'm here today to talk about a supplemental impact fee that my client was charged. So you should have in front of you a document. I guess let me first, before I dive into that, talk about this development that we're talking about, College View Apartments. The apartments were developed in 2014. My client purchased them in 2017 from the original developer. When they purchased these apartments, they were fully leased, fully occupied. Stepped in and has operated them at or about full occupancy ever since. As you might guess, they serve almost exclusively as residences for students attending the university. What we've got, when my client purchased the property, it was given an agreement that was signed by the original developer with Ecua. As part of that, I'm sure you've seen this and others like it before, simply an impact fee agreement whereby the initial developer said, okay, we need about 18,360 gallons worth of water and sewage flow gallons per day. And in exchange, we're going to pay an initial impact fee of X. That was provided to my client when it purchased the property. It appears that since the initial development, that threshold level of usage jumped from about 18,000 gallons a day to about 20,000 gallons a day. In this initial letter as well, there was an indication that, okay, if for 12 months the usage significantly exceeds what we've agreed upon in this impact fee agreement, well then a supplemental impact fee would be assessed in that instance.
Quick
Then-
question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the word significantly part of it?
I don't believe so. I think they labeled it as 100 gallons or more per day. So if that 12-month average exceeded by 100 gallons or more per day, that threshold, that would be the trigger of the supplemental impact fee.
It was just significant was a little loosey-goosey,
Okay.
so I just wanted to.
Absolutely, by all means, please stop me if you have questions. So what we've got in your packet, labeled as Exhibit B, is a letter that my client received in about July of 2019. And I say July, you'll see it's dated in April. It was actually sent to the former property manager, and so the transition of getting it to my actual client lasted until about July. In that letter, it serves two functions. One, it's a notice from ECUA to my client saying, hey, we've been monitoring your usage for the past 12 months, and despite having a threshold of about 20,000 gallons per day, you've actually been using over that 12-month period 28,000 per day. Again, in that same notice, it said, okay, you're made notice, you're notified of this increase in usage, and at the same time, we're going to assess you an about an $82,000 supplemental impact fee. So, needless to say, that immediately concerned my client. What I've got now there as Exhibit C is a graph showing the average daily flow, gallons per day, used at that property. So upon receiving that notice in July, it took immediate steps to invest significantly in its property and get that usage down. It invested heavily and changed out all of its water fixtures at the facility, all the sinks, all the faucets, all the shower heads, all the toilet flow systems, and made those all low flow. It additionally updated its leases to provide that any excess, quote-unquote, excess usage used by a tenant would be charged back to the tenant. So incorporated a sense of tenant responsibility for how much water, how much sewer, how much all of that they're using. They saw an immediate and drastic reduction in the flow. You'll see that downtick right there about August of 2019. By those immediate steps that they took, that usage dropped well below the threshold immediately. They've been able to consistently keep it well below that threshold since that time, with the exception of the uptick that you'll see in about November of this past year. That leads us to Exhibit D, and Mr. Perkins, this is as a result of your request. So in November, over Thanksgiving, it was discovered they had a significant pool leak. The usage usually drops dramatically over Thanksgiving because a lot of the students go home. If you look at Exhibit D, this is a daily tracker, I believe, of the usage at the property. And there's a massive uptick during that Thanksgiving break, again, due to that pool leak. I attached an invoice showing that the repairs made for that as well in early December.
Excuse me just a moment, Mr. Cobb. Dr. Walker, did you want to add something?
Due to, the massive uptick was due to what?
A pool leak.
A leak in the swimming pool?
Yes, correct. So, in short, what we've got is, since they learned of this increase in usage, immediate steps have been taken. Usage has dropped significantly below even the threshold prior to the notice from ECUA, and it's remained that way and remained consistently that way, again, since about August of this past year. I think we're looking for a couple things. One, looking for a waiver of the impact fee. So as I mentioned, that impact fee was about $82,000. I think the documents and the information that I've shared shows a couple things. Shows that, one, that usage is down and significantly down, confirming that there has not been a permanent impact on the system, such as one would expect the impact fee to cover. I think the other thing I'd want to mention is, I think most concerning for my client, it'd be looking for an open dialogue with ECUA. For example, if there's 3 months of significant uptick in usage, a conversation with ECUA to say, hey, we see that there's significant increase in usage at this property. Can you get it down? Because my client has shown it clearly can and is clearly motivated to do that. I think what we're wanting to push is that, frankly, in everybody's best interests to conserve the resources that we have, to save both the students living in its apartment and other folks involved costs associated with this, and make sure that the ECUA system is adequately structured and serviced. So, like I said, that $82,000 impact fee, my client's been making monthly payments since October, has paid about $34,000 to date. And again, based on the steps that it's taken, would hope and has to work with ECUA, that ECUA would waive that impact fee and allow it to move forward, again, within the framework of the allowed usage that those impact fees have already been paid for. I've got a representative from our client, Jason White, here as well, asset manager for the property. He or I are here to answer any questions that you might have.
And if you'll stay right there, we have one light on already, so if you've concluded your presentation, we'll proceed with that. Dr. Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. McCaw, for coming, and I appreciate your email the other day, and invited you to be here tonight to be able to share with us in front of the entire board what your concern was. I think, Madam Chair, before we move forward, you said something that is of concern to me. You indicated that and I just need a point of clarification. I'm not questioning anybody in terms of how they run their business here. But you pointed out in your presentation that at some point, well, let me make the assumption that College View Apartments, is that mostly college students that primarily reside there?
Almost exclusively, if
mostly
not
exclusive college students.
Correct.
So new tenants that are coming in now sign a lease that if they go over a certain amount of water or sewage usage, they can be charged additionally.
Correct, in an effort to encourage tenant responsibility in their usage.
Yeah, now, this is what I really need help with. How do you set that baseline as to they're using too much and then they get charged, right? And if that is the case, would they also be warranted the same thing that you're asking us to do here, and that is if your client goes over a certain amount for ECUA to give some warning? Would you think that would also apply to college kids who may use water and sewage as to however y'all got to this baseline of what was too much? And then in addition to that, doesn't that create also some possible health concerns? Because what people may tend to do less is to flush less. And, taking that into consideration, and these are college kids who are going to school on fixed incomes, right? Fixed incomes of their parents. So I think what you're asking, we can certainly entertain here. But I think the other piece of it is, if you're asking to board, hey, give us a heads up if water usage goes up. Shouldn't your client also do the same thing for these kids?
If I may, absolutely.
And if you will address everything through the chair, it's just
Yes,
the protocol, if you
protocol.
will do that.
Yes.
Sure.
Absolutely.
It's kind of weird, but.
That's
it's
okay.
the way
That's
it's
okay.
done.
I'm an East Texas guy, so
It's okay.
I just came in from the meeting today. You're absolutely correct in that we're monitoring daily now, actually, the usage of the water, and we're addressing to the residents that we look at these units and go, okay, you're in excess at this point. Our goal is not to build them, period. Like I don't want to, but I have to have some sort of leverage to be able to to go to them and say, hey, this is a problem. And we're going to take on the responsibility. Look, I've been in college housing for 24 years. We lease by the bed. This is, this is part of the reason they brought me in to be the asset manager. We can't rely on them to do it themselves necessarily. All we can do is encourage them, and then we're going to constantly maintain. The measures we've taken are not the final measures we're taking. We're continuing to look for other water-saving abilities. As a matter of fact, I'm going to a conference next month where there's that ability. So to answer your question, yes, we give them the same grace with regard to saying, hey, we're notifying them daily. We're not waiting until it's a 6-month problem. We're literally, because this is important to us. And so but to answer your question, I think it just, on the big picture, I don't want to build them. I don't want this to be an issue, and so I don't expect them to, I don't think we have to worry about them not flushing. I think it's what they're, right? I mean, it's like, anyway. So the measure that we put in place for the lease is just for us to have that ability, because if it's not in writing, it didn't happen for us, right? So if we don't want to, but if we're forced to, we will. So, yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Second, okay. Mr. Perkins?
How many units are there?
We are 400, I measure everything in beds because we lease everything individually, so there's about 450 beds, which is probably translates into 150, 160 units.
Okay, so. So that, if they were at their threshold that they've talked about, they'd have 120 gallons of water a day, so it wouldn't be like they wouldn't be flushing. I mean, there'd be enough water if they were at their old threshold. It wouldn't be that there'd be a water scarcity. One thing that we know, or that at least we can surmise from the current Democratic primary, is that college students love free stuff, And if the water is free and the toilet is free, I'm going to use all I can. I'm going to set up a dog washing business and have great big long jacuzzi baths and all this stuff, man. I'm going to be washing cars out in the parking lot and utilizing all that free water, and you can't blame people. But I think what's happened is that they have recognized that they had that, and they put some incentives in there to restrict that. So I think that probably addressed most of the problem. And then on top of that, they put in all these modern low water usage devices that have brought it down. So the likelihood that they'll be exceeding it again, to me, seems pretty low. Now, as far as us notifying people, I really don't think that's something we can get into, because we've got tens of thousands of accounts, and we can't, monitor everybody's water and take responsible for that. I mean, people are going to have personal responsibility for that, in my opinion. But but I am wondering on a couple of things on our impact fees. So we've had this 1-year anomaly in the time that this place has been here. Are the impact fees? They're not charged yearly. They're not for a yearly use. They're for an overall use on the impact of the system.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's correct.
It is? Okay, but I also, so we've got that. We think we've corrected the anomaly, but we still have the anomaly. And I don't know what our lawyer can tell us about this, but I know that in the past we have been prohibited from waiving impact fees or waiving any fees because it's in our bond covenants and we just can't do it, But I don't think we're prohibited from adjusting fees when there's a reasonable, rational reason for doing it. And to me, if they're going to, if the problem has been resolved and they've got documentation for it, I would be open to some sort of adjustment on that fee. Now, we still had the overusage and it had the impact on the system, so I think, we have to have some impact fees there. To what level that is, I don't know. I've got what I think is fair in my mind, but I'll just leave that to myself and see what the rest of the board thinks. But I think that given the totality of the situation, that it would be reasonable for us, and I don't know if it's something staff and attorneys and everybody should look at and negotiate, or if we should try to figure it out here. But I think it would be reasonable for us to try and make some sort of reasonable accommodation, because they're not going to have a continuing impact that's over what their original limit was.
So, if you will indulge me, Dr. Walker, I want to address some of the things that Mr. Perkins said, just for clarification. So, when the legislature enacted the whole concurrency thing and said you will charge impact fees, it was designed to measure the impact on the system, the whole system of some entity. So if you are building a development of houses, pardon me, in northern Escambia County, there is an impact on roads, on sewer, water, schools. And the entities have to create the infrastructure for that impact to exist. So the impact is not about how much you use from month to month. It is the impact, the infrastructure requirement that the system must have in order for your development. So it's different. It's not about a fee for services provided or a fee for what you use. Just to clarification, because those are different animals. And you have presented, first of all, congratulations on your conservation efforts. I mean, I love people who have a problem and take action and have results. That's kind of amazing. And I would assume that the measures that you took and are continuing to take will bring that threshold down to the original amount. But I don't know that we have enough data right now to say, we have 2 months, I think, where it was below that threshold. And those were months when kids are out of school and might have gone home for vacation. I would be reluctant to adjust any impact fee right now, not to preclude it, but I'd like to see a longer trend, because essentially we have to have the infrastructure there if it spikes back up. So that's my concern, and you know, you need to be rewarded for what you've done, and I'm all for that. It's just I don't know that we have a true representative sample of how you have brought it down. So I jumped ahead of Dr. Walker, so I'm going to defer to him now.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a policy matter. I don't like to make exceptions to policy in single cases. That's generally not the right way to run an organization. I like to change the policy if there's something wrong with the policy. And sometimes an individual case points out the need for a change of policy. I think this is such a situation. Our policy says that for commercial impact fees, they may be changed if we see that the actual usage in the future at some time is greater by a certain percentage or certain amount than the original estimate. And that's probably a good policy, a very good one, because the original estimates by the original owners, especially if they intend to sell it in the near future, are probably always lowball estimates. So I imagine many of these commercial impact fees are increased before too long. But there's another feature of our policy. It's in the contract that the apartment owner signed, and that I presume that every commercial contract, impact fee contract, that once the impact fee has been increased to some level, has been set at some level, I presume either by original setting or by a later increase, that it can never be lowered again. That's in the contract. I think it's the very last sentence of the contract or something like that. Perhaps Mr. Cobb has it in front of him.
I do. It's the last sentence, the last sentence of the next to last. It is the last sentence of the thing. And the clarification is there will be no refund in the event there's a reduction.
No
And-
refund in the event of reduction. Thank you. That seems to me a harsh policy when a property owner, a commercial impact fee payer, a property owner, makes strenuous efforts, as has been done in this case, to get the water and sewage consumption back down. In fact, down below what was at that time, this time, the previously agreed on level of 20,000 gallons per day. That would be discouraging conservation, whereas in our pipeline publications, once a year, we put out a message to encourage customers to conserve water. So there's a policy that seems to cut off our own nose, if you will, at the same time, I think being unfair to a commercial property owner who has made the effort to get the impact on our system back down. And they did. They got it down from 28,000 gallons per day to below 20,000 per day, at least for a couple of months. I agree with the chair that we don't have enough data, enough monthly record yet to actually make a change. But I do think we have enough. To me, it's conclusive to me that we need to change the policy so that a commercial property owner is not stuck with a big increase in the impact fee, and then even though they may find that excessive use and may subsequently reduce that excessive use back down and get it back down, get the impact on our system back down to a lower level. I think when a property owner is faced with an increase, and I think it was not just a one-year increase, but I expect that got up to 28,000 over several years' time. Okay, either way, I don't think it matters.
It may. Why don't you respond? What was the escalation time?
So if you look at Exhibit C, that shows usage since October 2015. And I think I want to make one point of clarification that the reduction below that threshold happened in August of 19. And aside from that pool leak for the past 6 months, even including that pool leak, the aggregate level of those 6 months has been below that threshold.
So, Madam Chairman, I think we should ask our staff, we should direct our staff to come up with to review our policy and to include in the policy provisions that make allowances for increases in impact on our system that have been corrected by the property owner and have been gotten back down to a more reasonable level. And that we should not have a policy that says that once and for all, forever, once the impact fee has been increased, it can never be refunded. I take it that a refund would be part of what we might be talking about here. I think in the meantime, we should defer action, further action on this case, perhaps just freeze everything where it is or something like that, whatever can be worked out fairly between ECUA and the property owner. And until we have time to, one, change our policy perhaps, or at least consider changing it. I'm not saying that I have to be right about this. And two, we get more data from as to usage by the customer.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. You're not making a motion right yet. We're just
I
discussing.
didn't make a motion, no, but certainly a recommendation.
Ms. Campbell.
So I spoke with Robert before all of this started. You know, when you run for ECUA or any government position, everybody starts talking about all the money that you make. When I first got on the board, I hired an assistant. She pretty much makes more than I do now. And this is the second time in less than a year that I've had a conflict of interest with a position to vote on with my current employer. So unfortunately, this month I had to resign my job at Emmanuel Shepherd and Condon because I never want to be on this board representing the people of District 1 and not be able to vote for the people on District 1. It's a wonderful firm, thank you. I work with Mr. Cobb, but I will no longer work with Mr. Cobb after March 1. And I hate that, but it puts me in a position where that I cannot vote, and I hate that. I deserve to vote for the people of District 1, but I did talk to Robert about would I be able to speak, and he said, yeah, that I could speak, but I could not vote. So I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. I won't vote, and I won't make a statement about the vote, but I just had a couple of questions in my mind, because this is not the first time this has come up. So you bought the property in 2017, is that correct? Okay. And then this came to your attention just this year?
Well, there was a letter sent, I guess in April of 19,
Correct, and that's in your packet, Exhibit B.
and then it, through going to the
So it's-
original owner, it finally made its way to Boston, basically, in July.
Okay. So I see it, you know, when I'm looking on C, Exhibit C, I see it kind of start creeping up when you bought it, all the way. So I wondered, do you have any idea what, okay.
There's no, I'm sorry.
If you could answer
sorry.
to the,
There's no smoking gun at this point with regard to it was X. I will tell you that as owners, I've been an operator for about 24 years of these properties. I've recently changed over to the asset management side for the ownership. And so I've worked for multiple third-party operators, and in this case, we have third-party operators. And so ironically, whenever he bought this property, I was his operator. My company sold it to another group who was the operator, and then they changed the operator. So I think that, not making excuses, I think the reality of it is that during these transitions that there was probably a lack of attention. And I also will tell you that not everybody takes the water as seriously as other markets.
thank you very much for going right where I was going. I'm actually going to appoint someone today to our Citizen Advisory Council that's in the property management, because, you know, this kind of stuff comes up, and I want to do a better job of understanding it, and I want to do a better job of setting policy for it. But I did notice that it did start creeping up when you bought, and then when it came to your attention, you started correcting that. So, and I do appreciate you correcting that. I just want to tell you, if you had my 26-year-old son, your water bill would have been through the roof, because I can't believe a child could take a shower for that long. Incentive, not a child, but a man. Incentive to save water is a very, very good thing that I think you've done. I think it was a little late in this. I do think we have enough, the board has enough time. We do have a whole year. I don't know if that was noticed on page Exhibit D. It does show a whole year, so I don't think we need to delay this decision any longer. And that's all I really have to say. I just had a few questions, and I did want my board members to understand why I would not be voting on this issue, but it'll be the last issue that I don't vote on.
Mr. Perkins. Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I agree with Dr. Walker on a lot of what he said, but I think that sometimes, you know, we're just not wise enough, and it's just not possible to have all policies cover all situations. And sometimes there's an outlier to policy. I'm not just saying this case, but sometimes there are outliers to policy. There are special circumstances that justice and what's right, you know, require us to deviate, you know, a little bit. In this case, I think what he's recommending makes sense as far as a policy change. And I kind of agree with Ms. Benson too, that yeah, it's gone down and it's 2 months, or, you know, however long, maybe 6 months, yeah, probably 6 months, depending on how you look at the data, but it's not quite a year yet, and is 6 months data enough? I feel pretty confident that it will stay down, but to justify waiving fees, it might be better to, or adjusting fees, it might be better to have empirical data that has gone on. So I would be in favor of us, having the staff look at the proper language, but language something to the effect that, that an entity shall be eligible to a refund of X amount. I was thinking like 50%, but a refund of X amount of additional impact fee if the usage falls below the original estimate for a period of 1 year. So say that somebody comes in like these people have, and I think, a lot of it's probably related to new management and no limits on the water. So they come in, the water spikes, it's a 1 year spike, it's not something that's gonna go on forever. They recognize it, do the responsible thing, get it under control, and even modify the physical buildings so that it's very unlikely that it'll increase again, so that in those situations, I don't think it's fair to penalize somebody forever, when it was just a short anomaly in time. So I'd be interested in making some sort of adjustment, whether it's in policy or specifically to this. But I do think it's probably wise to have it in policy because it may come up again.
I guess we all need to be sure what this animal is that we're talking about on impact fees, because I'm looking at it as the impact addresses capacity, and we create a system that allows you to have the capacity to use X, and that's not a fluid thing. That's a finite thing. You have the capacity for 128,000 gallons, and you may choose to conserve and not use that, but the capacity is there. And that's how I view impact fees. I don't look at it as to what your water usage costs our system, because that's the water bill. And the water bill measures those things. And my concern is how in the world you create a fluid policy for something as finite as the infrastructure to serve. It's the ability to serve, it's not the service that we do, because that's what the bill measures. If there's a way to do it, that could be. I just can't, it's beyond this brain's ability to come up with that policy. And I think what you're hearing is everybody would like to reward you for your efforts to conserve. I'm just thinking about all of the cases we would have to suddenly create a policy that covers. And I don't know how to do it. And what is this impact fee covering, I guess is my question. Because I think we're talking about different things. And it may be beyond the scope of what we're doing here today. I think it needs a little bit more study. I think we all would kind of like to reward you for what you've done. I don't know how we rewrite history for what you've used and the impact on the system. I think that there's the possibility of going forward, having a change. To go backwards, I think is a little more complicated, but I see that our attorney's about to bail out this blathering idiot at your chair, so I'll defer to Mr. Beasley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my light was on before your comments. So I just wanted to note that in discussing this, and obviously the board sets policy, I did want to make sure that we understood that we have a contract between us and this party, and it's the same commercial contract that we've signed with every commercial entity in town. So when we talk about setting policy, certainly the board could give direction to the staff to do so. But on these 2 points, if the direction is to allow refunds of impact fees if there has been a reduction of average daily flow, then that is going to be a modification of the contract between all of those parties. And so that direction would need to be, we direct the staff to engage in an amendment to all of those commercial contracts to do so. Because we need to amend, we have a contractual agreement with each other. So we need to amend that portion of the contract, which is up to the board. The second component that's at issue here is that this same contract provides for a 12-month average for increasing the fee. So if the board, I'm just tossing it out there, if the board in this discussion wants to encourage the reduction and reward the reduction that we see here, then when we amend the contract to take out this phrase, no capacity, or modify this phrase, no capacity impact fee or lesser part shall be refunded on account of any reduction in average daily flow, then we need to consider and receive some guidance from the board as to what period of time that average daily flow would be described. So you would have a 1-year calculation period for increasing, and the contract between the parties currently says there shall be no decrease. But if the pleasure of the board is to then try to create an incentive, I would suggest that we need to have some alignment of the measure period for the decrease. Because we are talking about modifying a contract, and so we need the terms to make sense and work with each other. And those were my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Dr. Walker.
Madam Chairman, I haven't heard anything yet that, in my opinion, speaks against the ideas I had, which were basically two. So I will make them as a motion and see how that goes.
Okay.
I move that the board instruct staff to review the commercial impact fee policy as regards the matters that we discussed here, namely how we respond to a significant increase in usage when the responsible customer is taking steps to reduce consumption in ways that will have a long-lasting effect in all likelihood, and that will encourage the conservation that we wish to promote. So first, that we instruct staff to study this matter and see if it can come up with a policy that seems more fair to a customer that is in this situation and is taking the steps that this customer is taking. And second, that as for this particular case, that we just freeze it in a way, in time, while we study, our staff studies the possibility of policy change, and we also obtain more data as to the customer's usage. Questions such as, should we require 12-month delay, 12 months of record to justify a cancellation of a proposed increase? That would be fine with me, but that's, I think, a detail to be just looked at in whatever analysis and study is done. And the other details basically can all be looked at, and I don't think we need to worry about them too much today. By proposing that we freeze the current situation, I would mean that we would not, I would suggest that we would not ask the customer to make further payments on the $90,000 increase in the impact fee, and that well, I guess that's about it. And that would not cut their water off.
Okay, so there are two parts to your motion. Is there a second?
Question.
Let's get a second before we ask any questions. Okay, so it dies for lack of a second. Dr. Alexander.
I have no question.
Dr. Walker, your light's still on. Did you want to continue?
I just think it is unfair of us to have an impact fee increase, commercial impact. We don't have increases in residential, by the way, even though some residential accounts may go substantially more than the standard impact fee that is set for all residential customers, which is the same amount for all of them. I think it's unfair to raise an impact fee because of a certain relatively short period of excessive use when steps are being taken to bring it back down. I think that line that says no refunds shall ever be made, et cetera, I think to me, there's something wrong with that particular statement in the contract.
Dr. Walker, might I suggest that you break your motion into separate parts and perhaps make the first motion to review the contract for impact fees? Just,
I would be happy to make a motion that we do step number 1 in my previous motion, and I think staff has the wording of that already. I want to emphasize again, I think we should not make an exception to our policy. I think we should change the policy.
thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second? Dr. Alexander? Your light's on. I didn't know if it's a second.
No.
Okay,
Question.
okay. Ms. Campbell, I assume you,
I was just saying that I wanted to apologize to the chair. I thought that D went from 2019 to 2020, and it is only a couple of months I see now. So that's just a clarification.
sure, okay.
Point of, if I may clarify that.
We're in the middle, a motion's been made, so if we could. So, the motion dies for lack of a second. Okay. Sorry. Heck. Who's vice chair? Here. You take the gavel. I will second your motion.
Second. And
Sorry.
approved.
Okay, now you're recognized, Dr. Alexander.
I have a question for Mr. Beasley, maybe. You know, in light of Mr. Cobb and his client being here today, and they making, I think, a tremendous case in terms of what their efforts have been. But, and I think you kind of alluded to it, Mr. Beasley. I just need some clarification in terms of what's being presented here by the board. Does this open the gates for anyone else coming behind what we're going to do here that could pose a great deal of burden on the board based on policy as it is written? We would like to be able to assist them, but is this somehow legally going to create some secondary concerns that, and I think I kind of heard you allude to that, maybe?
Mr. Beasley, to respond.
The ECUA and this entity are parties to a contract. The contract was set pursuant to the direction of the board or some guidance that helped, and legal counsel helped the ECUA develop the contract. Incorporated in that contract are words, but also policies of the ECUA at the time of the contract. They entered into this particular contract in 8/4/17. It is my understanding, although I've had a short tenure here, that it would be fairly a good guess to say that most all commercial contracts for a certain time period, maybe a large time period, are going to have these exact same words in it, which means that the staff, in following the agreement between the parties, had a couple directions. One is that they were to take a 12-month average of the usage, and if that average exceeded a certain threshold, they are to adjust the impact fee, which occurred here, over a 12-month average. And then the second part of that contract that's been at debate here is the last line, which says that once that increase has been made, there shall be no refund of any of the account on impact fees or capacity fees, or different fees, as a result of a reduction in average daily flow. So we have two components of a contract between the parties. My suggestion is that twofold to answer your question. One is that I believe it's probably in every contract that we have. So it is a widespread issue that the staff is currently operating under, as this is how they adjust impact fees. Secondly, if the board wishes to set a new policy and that policy guidance direct the staff to amend the contract, then certainly the staff would do so and come back, but it's going to result in some process of amendment of all contracts, because you couldn't or wouldn't want to do an amendment for one party on such a broad sweeping issue and then not offer the same benefit to the other parties. Now, the Dr. Walker's suggestion was, when I brought it up, was really a little bit more detailed than that. It had a second layer, which is, it sounds like the board wants to, or the initiative would be to reward people for reducing their flow and their usage, as opposed to punish them by virtue of leaving it in this no refund policy, basically. If we do adopt a policy, then it's going to have to direct a contract amendment. Might not be a scenario where any commercial contracts disagree with that amendment, but it will create a series of amendments that need to happen since the parties are seeking that reduction. The final part of that, and I'm sorry to give a long-winded answer, the final part of that, where I was kind of getting bogged down in the details, but I wanted the board to understand kind of the dynamics of it, is that the increase 12-month average daily flow is defined, but the decrease currently is not, because there is no decrease. And so if it was a study period for a decrease, my only suggestion was that the staff be given direction that period be adjusted, or at least to match or be considered whether or not you need the same period or not, given the fact that we're looking at a different period of increase here in this case versus the decrease period. And so I was getting into the weeds a little bit on how to accomplish this change if the board wanted to do so. The short answer is, we're parties to a contract. If we want to change that contract, then we need to effect an amendment of that as a result of any policy shift of the ECUA.
Mr. Perkins.
Madam Chairman, we can pass a policy and have that be a policy and not amend every single contract, but just know that if anybody comes in, that policy applies to them. We can have that basic policy, and we don't have to go amend every single contract that we have existing, over the whole time we've been in existence. But if somebody comes in and says, hey, you guys have this policy, we'd like to apply for it, then they can. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that if we have, frankly, honestly, I don't think there'll be many cases like this. But if there are, I think it's a good thing. We're going to conserve water, protect the resource, limit our capacity, and I do think that what we're talking about, Madam Chairman, is kind of the same thing in that, yeah, we have to build for capacity, and that capacity is there, kind of like ECUA does with our sewer plants. We have when we had downtown the Main Street sewage treatment plant, we had a $20 million capacity, 20 million gallon capacity a while back. Well, we had an April monsoon a while back in 2014 where it washed out Piedmont and Bayou and all that stuff, flooded a bunch of our lift stations. Because of I&I, we exceeded that capacity, and we actually had flow going into the bay in some areas and out of the lift stations and everything like that, because we can't design for a 1,000-year storm. We just can't build that kind of capacity because it's too expensive. So occasionally there is an exceedance, and in this case, it appears to be an anomaly, and so there's an exceedance, and so charging them for, the capacity, it'd be like DEP charging us for the capacity for that April monsoon. I mean, it just wouldn't make sense. And I support what Dr. Walker was making a motion to and what you seconded, but it was just so complex and so long and not concise enough is the reason I didn't second and go with. I've got language that I think would help us.
Okay, and yes, let me say that right now we are discussing the motion, to refer to staff. So if you have language that you would like to clarify that motion,
I'll just
that's fine.
throw it out there before I make it a substitute motion, just to see if you guys think it sounds okay.
Okay.
And if not, I'd like to, to have maybe a substitute motion that we ask staff to explore the possibility of a refund to commercial customers who are charged an additional impact fee after customers demonstrate a reduction in usage below the original agreed daily flow for a period of 1 year. So what it would do is it would look at the possibility of a refund in a situation like this, where only for the additional part, only for the additional capacity, nothing below what the original agreement was, and only after the customers demonstrate for a period of a year, usage below the original agreed upon level. So I don't know if that helps or makes sense, but that would be something I'd be willing to support.
That is a substitute motion. Is there a second? The substitute motion dies for a lack of a second. Dr. Walker.
Madam Chairman, again, I wish to say that nothing Mr. Beasley has said scares me off of the idea of asking staff to look into this matter and review the policy and perhaps come back to us with some changes. The details, such as Mr. Perkins just suggested, are those are details that might come to the surface in a review. They may be very good ones. Well, I don't think we need to instruct the staff about what they're going to come up with. One thing I could suggest, though, that would, I think, ease some concern about, we may be faced with a multitude of claims and so forth, is this. I would not suggest that we propose that just any owner, property owner who walks in the door can request a reduction in their impact fees, but rather that if and when, and only if and when, we propose to increase an impact fee, we give the property owner an opportunity to look into the matter, to make reductions in their consumption, etc., before the proposed increase goes into effect. That would limit the application of this exceptional policy to those situations where we have initiated the matter by proposing an increase. They would be few and far between, I think, but it would be a matter of great fairness, in my opinion. So I speak in favor of the motion to adopt the one thing. Is that right? Is that the motion?
The motion was to refer to staff to review the commercial impact fee policy. And much of what we're discussing right now would be the discussion once staff came back with a
Right.
recommendation.
Right.
So,
So I speak in favor of my motion again.
Ms. Campbell.
So the duration of the contract is just for, I'm gonna ask Bill a question, if that's okay. The duration of the contracts is just as long as they own the property?
Well, it runs with the property, and ownership could change.
All right, okay. Oh, okay, so it runs forever, once
Yes.
the property, okay. Okay, that was one question I had, and then, I love this discussion though, because it is the job of the board to set policy, not staff, and I like that we're having this great discussion on policy, so, thank you.
Yeah, I think right now we don't all agree on the definition, and which is why we really need staff to come back and say, this is what you're doing, and this is the overall impact on the utility, on the customers, and so forth. And so I think it's a good motion for us to look at the policy, review it, and discuss it. But in many ways, we're talking about different things. So, Dr. Walker, your lights on.
I'd just like to say, to make sure everybody is clear on this, that what we're talking about is a one-time payment by the property owner of a proposed impact fee increase. It's not an annual payment. It's not anything that will come due again in the future. It's a one-time only
Yeah, Dr.
payment.
Walker, right now, we're just talking about the motion to refer to staff, that we're not really talking about the substance of what the staff will come back with. We can have a subsequent motion that deals with these people, but let's vote on this motion. Mr. Perkins, your light's on.
I just want to be clear on what the motion is, because when Dr. Walker laid it out there, it was kind of a long, complex, very detailed motion, and then the motion that you said was pretty brief and stuff. So I want to, trying to help with affordable housing. These students need to be able to afford the housing, anything we can do to help them with the cost down is good. But can we restate the motion or just have a very clear wording of what we're voting on?
Okay, go ahead.
Madam Chairman, I would like to restate the motion if that, whatever
Sure.
that requires. The motion is that we direct staff to undertake a review of the commercial impact fee policy with respect to those issues that we have discussed today.
Okay. Yes. And much of what we discussed will come back in terms of their policy. I believe does that satisfy your needs, Mr. Perkins? Okay. Dr. Alexander?
Do we have a copy of that contract?
Mr. Beasley?
Yes,
We-
Madam
we do.
Chair. Actually, Mr. Cobb distributed as his Exhibit A.
Oh, okay.
It's going to have, mine has some highlighted version, and the subject language that was being discussed is the page 2 of that first page, Exhibit A. Last paragraph before the signatures.
Thank you.
Sure.
Madam Chairman, I received an email copy of it from staff, I assume.
Okay, so we're voting on the motion to refer this to staff. I see no more lights. Please vote. Dr. Alexander, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I- wrong button.
You were just eager to vote. And it passes 4-1 with 4 yeses and 1 abstention. Okay, now, Dr. Walker.
I think it would be appropriate now to take up the second motion. With regard to the particular current case, I make a motion that the ECUA suspend action on this on this particular case, suspend requirement of further payments on the proposed increase in the impact fee while we review policy and while we review policy. Just leave it at that.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Are we
Mr.
legal?
Perkins?
I believe that the board, if it's the pleasure of the board, to suspend the collection of the fee for the study period could be done legally and not in breach of the contract, and also not a waiver of the rights in the contract to collect that fee should the result of the study be adverse to the request of the party. It's just a stay of the collection proceeding. So yes, sir, I believe you're legal.
May I ask of the maker of the motion? There are monies due from the period when you were in excess of the agreed upon 20,000. Are those payments still coming in, or are you up to date on those?
So usage payments have been paid in full window.
No, I'm talking about
And
the
the
additional
impact
impact
fee
fees.
entered into a payment plan with ECUA. I think the first payment was in October of this past year, and payments have been made monthly since. And so we are current on those monthly payments. From a detail standpoint, I would note that at the time those payments were being made, usage had already dropped below the threshold. And so currently, as those payments continue to accrue, again, usage is well below that 20,000 threshold. We were at 17,000 this month, 14,000 last month.
Mr. Beasley?
I had missed the detail that they were under a payment plan. I think the motion, if would be properly phrased as a stay of the payment plan until such time as the staff report results in a vote by the board of a consideration of a policy change, which would just stop them or payment obligation under the payment plan in the records of the ECUA. If they do that, it should not result in any type of adverse collection action or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I want to make sure that by this motion, we're not saying that they are absolved of paying for additional impact fees at this point. We haven't studied enough, and I think it's a very fair, generous motion on the part of Dr. Walker to do that. But, you know, that's payment for a period when you were well in excess of that. So I think we will look at it holistically. I just don't want you to leave thinking, oh, well, we don't ever have to pay that, because I don't think that's what's being said. Yeah, okay,
Understood, and appreciated.
yeah. I see no more lights. We've beaten this to death. So I think we are ready to vote on Dr. Walker's motion to essentially suspend the payments, the payment plan during the period that we study this issue and probably get additional records from you. Was that part of your motion?
Not about the additional records, but it's understood that we will get them.
Yes, okay. All right, then, please vote. And it passes with 4 yes, 1 abstention. So, thank you. Sorry, it was a long, drawn-out process. It's
I
a
appreciate
complicated
the
issue.
discussion.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you much, and we'll be in touch with staff.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you all again.
Sure. Okay, we come now to presentations, and we have a presentation, a special recognition award to Ms. Deborah Ben, former ECUA Citizens Advisory Committee member. Ms. Ben, if you will come forward. Oh, shoot. No, never mind. Sorry. You're gonna have to wait longer. Yeah, sorry. We have someone else who wanted to speak in open forum, and that is Barbara Hale of 1850 West St. Joseph Avenue. Ms. Hale, I apologize. You waited through all that and you almost missed your opportunity. Sure. And if you will press the button that says speak, it'll turn on a red light.
Okay.
And just give your name and your address for the record.
Okay, I am Barbara A. Hale, and 1850 West St. Joseph Avenue, Pensacola, Florida, 32501. And I am the new president for the Inglewood Neighborhood Improvement Corporation. However, my issue is with the water. It was a pipe bust, or probably several pipes busted. And ECUA, they did give us door hangers on the 6th of this month, and I think they went back and gave us door hangers again on the 10th of this month. And the door hangers, they stated that we need to boil our water. Okay, a lot of people boil their water, but the water, it came out gray, and it had substance in it. However, now it's still, the shower heads or the shower water is coming out gray with substance in it. Now, my community, a lot of them, we did have bottled water that we were giving to them and jugs of water. However, my question is, what do I do now? Because they're still having this water, they think it's polluted, but it just have the little debris, all that little white stuff in it, especially when you boil it, and then it's gray whenever they go to take a shower. And who do I need to talk with, or who can help us with getting water, bottled water, jugs of water for them until this is corrected?
Ms. Johnson, do you want to respond?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hale, we will be glad to gather information from you about the parts of the neighborhood where the problem is occurring. And we will have our technicians to go out and check the system, flush the lines if need be. And we'll check. I'm pretty sure the boil water notice is well passed, and the water should be safe to drink. But if there are dirty water issues that continue, we can continue to work on clearing those up. So I'll ask one of our staff to meet you and get some specifics from you in terms of the streets and the kind of the general area where the problem is occurring.
Okay, all right, and that's it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And you have your phone number on here too, so thank you, Ms. Hale. I don't see any lights. Appreciate you coming. And that closes the open forum. Now, Ms. Ben, if you would like to come forward, and I apologize for the misstep. Come on up here. So we have this plaque for you. How many years has it been?
15.
15, and you get a plaque,
Same
right?
as
Okay. So this is special recognition awarded to Deborah Ben for her service as a member of the ECUA Citizens Advisory Committee, December 2004 to January 2020. During this time, ECUA made many far-reaching decisions in the operations of its water, wastewater, and sanitation systems, and received substantial benefits from Ms. Ben's expertise and abilities. ECUA deeply appreciates the efforts put forth by Ms. Ben and the contributions she has made for the benefit of ECUA and its customers, presented this 25th day of February 2020. And you have been a wonderful member
Thank
of
you.
this organization.
Well, it's a wonderful board and committee to be a part of, and a ECUA staff and employees to be a part of, representing the community. Thank you all so
And
much.
come around anytime you want to hear an
I
hour
will.
discussion about policy.
It's always fascinating to me. Thank y'all. Thank you. It's been a privilege. Thank you. Me too. Likewise.
15 years go so fast.
Boy, does it not.
Okay, and we come now to the Recycle Star. Ms. Campbell, would you like to pull the winner out of the trash can?
There we go, and it's number 13.
Okay, and number 13 is Janeba Whitstruck. So if staff will communicate with her, and she will get all the accolades and awards from this great program that we do. Okay, the next item is approval of the minutes from the regular board meeting of January 28th, 2020.
Move approval.
It's been moved. Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
Oh, I'm over here, no wonder. I see no lights, so please vote. And it passes 5-0. The next item is the report of the Citizens Advisory Committee of February 18th, 2020. Ms. Campbell, you are recognized.
Thank you. The Citizen Advisory Committee met on February 18th, 2020 at 3 p.m. All members were present with the exception of Randy Ponson and Pushel Schneier. Item F was delivery of sanitation cans. It was for discussion only. Mr. Rudd discussed delivery of sanitation cans and responded to questions from the committee members about various and other, including employee recruitment and retention in the sanitation department. The committee requested the sanitation and human resource departments meet to define and resolve these issues. No formal action was taken. Item G was the 2019 Water Service Renewals Change Order Number 2. Recommendation was made by Mr. Perkins and seconded by Ms. Benson that the board authorize the executive director to approve a change order to the contract with Evans Contracting, Inc. in the amount of $122,277.20 for additional water service renewal work at Town Square condominiums with funding from CIP Project RW 818 2019 Water Service Renewals. The committee voted 9-0 in favor. Item H was an award of contract to Humphreys Well GAC vessel coating replacement. Recommendation by Ms. Benson, seconded by Mr. Perkins, that the board waive formal bidding process based on competitive quotes received in 2018 for an identical scope of work, and award the contract to Mansfield Industrial at the previously approved low quote price of $116,440 for replacement of the interior coating of the Humphreys Well GAC vessels, and two, to establish project funding for $123,000 from a transfer from CIP project RW 901Z well maintenance and testing. The committee voted 9-0 in favor. Item I was disposition of surplus property, 0.31 acres and 0.50 acres, two parcels that are adjacent to the Gillimard Emergency Storage Tank. Recommendation was made by Ms. Benson, seconded by Mr. Kimball. The board authorized the executive director to enter into a contract to sell the subject parcels for $25,000 to Real Business Consultants II Corporation, with all closing and transaction costs to be borne by Real Business Consultants II Corporation. The committee voted 9-0 in favor. Item J was granular activated carbon GAC rejection of bids. The recommendation was made by Mr. Kimball and seconded by Ms. Shumo that the board reject all bids for ECUA bid CC 2020-4, granular activated carbon, and direct the staff to rebid at a later date. Committee voted 9-0 in favor. I would like to move items G through J for approval at this time.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Please vote. And it passes 5-0.
Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. The next item is item 9C, the award of purchase replacement dump truck. You see the recommendation that we purchase a 2020 Volvo dump truck from Action Truck Center of Dothan, Alabama at a cost of $149,408.21.
A and B?
What are you asking me? Oh, so sorry, it was the next page. Let's just do this and then we'll go back since we've read that. Yeah, no, I've got it, it's okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Walker?
No.
Okay, Ms. Campbell?
Move staff recommendation.
It's been moved, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, please vote. And it passes 5-0. I apologize, folks. I missed operation items 9A and D. Probably the most important things we'll do today. The first one is the appointment to the Citizens Advisory Committee. And Ms. Campbell, I'll let you handle this item.
Thank you. I would like to appoint Mr. Bryce Pelfrey. I believe Bryce is here in the audience. Bryce is a managing director in property management with Beck Properties, CRE, which is a full-service real estate, property management, and insurance firm. The reason I chose Bryce was twofold. Number one, because we quite often get a lot of questions like we just got about commercial properties and commercial leasing, and we have a lot of people on our CAC board, one that knows a lot about insurance, one that knows a lot about HR, and I just thought Bryce would fill that void of knowledge and we have so much of that going forward. So that was number one. And number two, Miss Ben, who just left, and thank God for her service, she was wonderful. She was way down where I am at one end of District 1, and Bryce happens to be up in the middle of at the other end of District 1, where all the development is now ongoing up in Beulah. He's in Nature Trail, so I think he has a pulse of what's going on the other end of the district, which is so busy right now. So that was my two reasons, and I would like if you would support me on that appointment.
Would you like to move that we accept him?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we accept Bryce Pelfrey.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes, I want to know how we could take advantage of his Major League Baseball experience. That was it.
But depends on whom he cheers for,
That's
so.
right.
I second the motion if it's required.
Yes, thank you. Any discussion? Please vote. And it passes 5-0, so congratulations, you're part of the CAC. And Ms. Campbell, thanks for your thoughtfulness in your appointments for these. It's so important that our CAC have a variety of inputs and expertise, and clearly he's a great addition.
Thank you, and we'll see you next month, Bryce, for your
That's right.
first meeting, and staff will get in touch with you on what you need to do. Thank you.
Right. Then, 9B, which I just overlooked entirely, is consideration of the contract for the executive director, Mr. Bruce Woody. And you have all received the contract, and you have it also in a hard copy before you. Do we want to put a motion on the table, and then we can discuss individual parts if we wish to? Mr. Perkins?
Mr. Walker's ahead of me.
Oh, Dr. Walker?
I move approval of the proposed executive director's contract.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Oh, well. Oh, okay. Then please vote. And it's approved unanimously. Yay.
I'd like to say just good job with basically a straightforward, contract, Madam Chairman and Mr. Attorney, pretty simple, easy to understand.
Yeah. I will tell you that Mr. Beasley was really diligent in this contract. There were a number of fairly specific issues that he looked at very, very carefully, and there were a lot of specific questions, and he looked out for the ECUA and for our bottom line, and I really appreciate the diligence with which he approached that, and also Kim Scruggs did as well. But we're ready to go to the next chapter of ECUA. I know. Okay, thank you all, and who will tell Mr. Woody? Is that your job, Mr. Beasley?
It would be my pleasure, Madam Chair.
Okay, then you're on it. Okay, the next item is item D, investment management services. This is an extension of an existing contract for a firm to look at our long-term investment portfolio. Is there a motion? Mr. Perkins?
So moved.
It's been moved.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded, and the entity is Public Trust Advisors, who have been giving us this investment advice, and I'm told they're doing a good job, although I think this week all bets are off. Okay, please vote. Has everybody voted? And it passes 5-0. The next item is request to vacate portion of Colfax Street easement. Mr. Johnson, you want to explain this item?
Madam Chairman, basically, ECUA has ownership of an easement over a previous public right-of-way. The owner of some adjacent property has basically asked for us to vacate a portion of that easement. We've investigated. It does not interfere in any way with our ability to operate and maintain our facilities in the area. So we really have no issue with this and would recommend approval.
Okay. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. And this is the area where we had to relocate some sewer lines because of a problem, but that's a different part of this parcel. But we have all the appropriate easements in our new sewer lines, correct? Okay, good. Mr. Perkins?
Yeah, it says easement to be released. Released to whom?
Mr. Beasley?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. To direct Mr. Perkins' comments first, it would be released to the adjacent property owner. So there's a portion of this easement that is retained and a portion that's being released. And to address the comments of Madam Chair a minute ago, yes, this is the same property. We are effectively working with the developer of, this is the parcel across from the Veterans Park. And it started with a discovery that our line was in the wrong location. This is a glowing example of the efforts of the engineering and real estate department to immediately jump on a problem that was our creation, not our fault, but our creation, and then relocate it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Campbell?
I just want to.
Was your light on for another reason as well?
I was trying to answer your inquiry first,
Okay, so
and then Mr.
you
Perkins asked his question, so I
Okay.
addressed his first, and then yours.
Okay, good. Ms. Campbell?
No, that's, I just wanted to say, good job to staff, because this was holding up a really important project for a developer, and we didn't need it, and we actually had our easement in the wrong place, from what I remember.
For me, it concerned me because it looked like we might be giving property away, but the fact that we're gonna save a lot of money by not having to relocate a line that was in the wrong place is good work, so I really appreciate it.
And anytime, I think, Robert, anytime you vacate an easement, the law says it has to go to the adjoining properties, right?
Mr. Beasley?
Correct, Madam Chair, that would be correct. The easement rights that the ECUA retained was over the top of the property owner's property, so when we vacate, we just simply take that layer away.
But to be clear, this easement is not where our misplaced water main was. This is on the same property, but this is a separate easement. Yeah, okay. Did you want to respond, Mr. Beasley?
I wanted to confirm that, and I'm sorry, I may have confused things because I was going to respond to your statement about there's two things happening here, but yes, this is not the same location. We moved the location and then accommodated by adjusting only what ECUA needed and then releasing what was not needed to accommodate the development.
Okay, please vote. Thank you, Mr. Beasley. And it passes 5-0, and I guess we need to adopt the corresponding resolution, number 9F. Mr. Perkins?
I move resolution 2001.
It's been moved and seconded. Dr. Walker? Okay. Please vote. And it passes 5-0. Okay. Item 9G is the subject ECUA CWRF Gulf Power Pipeline Easement Agreement, and this is a little more complex than the last one. So, Mr. Johnson, we'll start with you if we can.
Certainly. ECUA was approached by Gulf Power to acquire an easement for a gas line to basically traverse our property, the property where the Central Water Reclamation Facility is, from Becks Lake Road basically to the south side of our property. When we first got their easement request, we had a lot of problems with the language and some of their requirements of the project. Our staff worked very hard, and we identified the things that we thought were not appropriate and needed to be changed. there came a point where they decided that we were not willing to move quickly enough for them, so they sent us a letter saying that they might sue us for eminent domain to cross our property. We sent them a letter back and said, we have a public purpose too, and we're better off basically trying to work this out together. And I think they understood that we had a very good point and agreed to that. We've worked out most of the issues on the gas line, but we have had a couple of other issues that we've been working with Gulf Power on for a very long time. One is for we've been requesting an easement for a future extension of the reclaimed water line southward across the Christ plant property, so that in the future we'll have the ability to extend reuse water to that area to the south there, to Greenbrier Road and 9 Mile Road, Scenic Hills, West Florida, and adjacent areas. And also, when we built the new plant, we worked with Gulf Power on the waste load allocation for the discharge from the plant. They basically have that waste load allocation in their permit, and we believe it's time to rethink how that waste load allocation is shared. And we've been trying to get them to work with us on that as well, and we believe that now that we have mutual interest, them for their easement and us with those, that we can get those things worked out, or at least a commitment from Gulf Power to work those things out. So based on the revised language to the easement, we're basically recommending that the board authorize us to sign that easement in exchange for a commitment from Gulf Power to resolve those other two issues. So.
And thank you, Mr. Johnson. And just so we're covered on all counts, I'd like to hear from Mr. Beasley, because this is a little odd. We are voting to make a commitment in hopes they make a future commitment. So I just want to make sure it's all copacetic.
This need of Gulf Power, thank you, Madam Chair, the need of Gulf Power to put a gas line across this property owned by Ecua brought Gulf Power to the table, and there was an exchange and negotiation which has resulted in this agreement. It appears that we are working with different departments of Gulf Power on different agreements, and in turn Gulf Power is working with different departments of the Ecua on different agreements. Once Gulf Power made it to the table, and we had an opportunity for a dialogue, these other two agreements, which have been in a long time making and things that Ecua needs of Gulf Power, were brought up, and negotiations kind of started simultaneously. Having said that, the Gulf Power gas pipeline easement agreement is negotiated in a final form that's acceptable to Ecua. So the request is one that is to approve the existing easement to indicate to Gulf Power that we are accepting of the Gulf Power pipeline easement terms, and thereby avoid a continued dispute with Gulf Power or eminent domain proceedings or any further proceedings on that matter. Let's put that matter to rest. But also extend the opportunity to keep negotiating on these other two documents, which are not yet ready for presentation to the board. The progress of the three documents two have lagged behind the other.
And you're very comfortable that, even though it's a little fuzzy, that this is the best way to proceed legally?
The departments that have been attempting to get Gulf Power's attention on those other two matters feel very strongly that Gulf Power's at the table now on something they need from Ecua, and we've reached a resolution on that, and that the approval of that document should be, if not contingent, at least in exchange for a continued negotiation with Gulf Power, keep them at the table, so to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Mr. Perkins?
Yeah, I like the concept. I'm a little nervous about the T's and I's not being dotted and crossed, but, it says in here that we've got a commitment from Gulf Power to provide an easement for the reclaimed water pipeline. So as long as you're sure we can have legal language that'll tie them to that. And then, it's not as strong as ECUA, to work with ECUA in good faith to resolve the waste load. I mean, good faith can be interpreted different ways, and they've got real good lawyers and everything, but I hope you protect us as much as you can. I think it's the right way to go, but I think there'll be some challenges, ahead on this. And on items like this that are going to be ongoing and lasting for a while, now that we've approved Mr. Woody's contract, I don't know if, we send him an email. I mean, we don't want to bother him with the minutia of day-to-day operations, but the bigger picture things that he might need to be made aware of, it might be worth having our executive director just CC him on some of that stuff, maybe some of the board reports or some of the things that are going on, just so he knows the big issues, not the minutia, but the big things that he's going to be having to deal with. Probably makes sense to let it, and this one would be one of them.
That's a good recommendation, Mr. Perkins. By the way, Mr. Woody requested mountains of materials. I don't think he would be bothered by being sent information. He really is very eager to get up to speed on the big pictures as well as the little pictures. Very encouraging. Mr. Beasley?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to address Mr. Perkins' comments because he astutely points out that there's a lot of soft language in here. So we have 3 agreements. One is what Gulf Power wants from ECUA, and that agreement is satisfactory to ECUA. Mr. Jerry Piscopo and such and his crew have blessed it. That's what the Gulf Power wants from ECUA. The next 2 things are what ECUA wants from Gulf Power, since we have them at the table. One is a water easement. The legal form of that is very simple. It's just a plain old regular ECUA water easement, page and a half long, not a problem. The holdup on that is the location of that easement. I believe Mr. Palmer and his department are working on with Gulf Power to figure out how to route that water easement. So that legal document is probably not going to be the subject of a great dispute, but the location still needs to be vetted out by the surveyors. It's a long easement. That's the second document. The third document is a waste load allocation agreement, and that document legally has a lot of challenges, not between the parties, but because DEP is involved. So the question is, how close can we get out of an agreement between the parties that in this future event, the primary issue is that Gulf Power can't even go to the DEP until their renewal date to ask for a transfer of the waste load allocation. So really all we're asking for is an agreement by them that if the conditions remain as they are now or change to our benefit, that at that time they ask for a transfer of that waste load allocation to ECUA. And so that in itself is going to have to be kind of a soft commitment agreement. We'll do our best to protect the ECUA. This is the first time we've had Gulf Power at the table willing to discuss any of these agreements.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Ms. Campbell?
I'm just amazed that we've gotten this far with this, and I wholeheartedly support this. Thank you very much, Robert, for your work on it, and Jerry and Don. I mean, this is just really good. It's great news.
Okay, please vote. And it passes 5-0. We have a couple of items. Do you want to take a 5-minute recess? We've got an unfinished business on grinder pump policy and commercial pump customer.
Unless anybody else wants 40 seconds.
Anybody need a break? All right, we'll forge forward. Okay. Next comes the budget report. Ms. Shelton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I don't have a written report to provide to you today, but however, we are about 40% through the fiscal year. We are looking in good shape. There's nothing that's standing out as being terribly over budget. Our net ending position is not significantly different than it was from the quarterly financial report that I provided to you last month.
Anyone have any questions of Ms. Shelton? Okay, well, I'm sure you're in the midst of getting documents ready for next fiscal year's budget, too.
I have one question, please.
Yes, Dr. Walker?
Thank you. I'm just a curious thought. I've never question I've never had before. Does warm weather in the wintertime, does a warm winter affect our revenue?
I don't know as it so much as temperature as I do know the rainfall amount is going to affect the revenue. If we have a very wet year, we're going to have less revenue because people aren't watering their lawn as much, or those types of things. If we have a dry year, we're going to have probably higher revenue. I'm not sure it's significantly higher or lower, but it does affect the revenue. Not sure about temperature. Has anybody ever looked at that?
Be interesting to study, though. Good point, Dr. Walker.
To answer your question about the budget cycle, yes, we are starting into the budget cycle. Both CIP will provide a listing of those projects at the April CAC meeting, and then the operating budget will be coming along as well. I think hopefully Mr. Woody will be here to join in on some of those discussions. And then also, just to let you know, the comprehensive annual financial report is complete. We have the auditor's letters of opinion. We did get a clean opinion again this year. So I will be publishing that and providing that to you all probably within the next couple of weeks. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Campbell, wait a second.
I think a couple of years ago, we had 90 inches of rain. It'd be interesting to see if that year that we had the 90 inches, how the revenue was affected during that 1 year. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, although it sort of would depend on when it came. Like in the winter, people aren't watering their lawns, so that would be
True.
another variable.
Well, the other, we can go back and do a study on that, but then we would have to take into account the rate increase for that year, because some of that revenue, if it's a dry year, some of that increased revenue would be because of the rate increase. But, we could probably extrapolate it somehow if that's something you want us to look at.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The Executive Director's report. Mr. Johnson?
Madam Chairman, just a couple things. Last month, we had a representative from Habersham subdivision in Santa Rosa County about some peanut oil that was on the street. I asked Tim to get his contact information after he was here so I could try to talk to him, talk to our Keith Kyles in our sanitation department about the issue. Randy was out, I think, that week, and I asked Keith to set up a meeting with him. Mr. McCoy, I believe his name was, basically when Keith talked to him said he wasn't going to meet with us anymore. I've talked to Randy several times about it. The subdivision reported us to EPA and DEP. They know that we cleaned up the liquid and have no further issue with us about this. I got a letter last week from the Santa Rosa County Administrator asking what we were going to do. And basically, I'm getting ready to send them a letter back and say we believe that we caused no harm, that this stain will fade over time, and thank you very much. So I just want to let you know about that. We have problems from time to time. I think our staff does a very good job of following up and doing their best to clean up behind themselves, but in this case, we don't believe that ECUA has any more duty for that area. So I'll let you know.
Yes, Dr. Alexander.
So the stain is still on the roadway?
I believe so. It's been fairly rainy since the last meeting, and not a lot of chance for the sun to do its usual job. So it may take a little longer, if it stays cloudy or whatever, but given time, we believe it will fade out.
So there's no,
Use your microphone, because it said that you're recorded.
so there's no chemical treatment that can be put on the, to remove the stain?
One, there's none that we're aware of. We did experiment with some Dawn detergent to see if that would help. It really didn't help a lot. We did a little test patch. There's a real concern if you go to pressure washing, that you could damage the pavement, the asphalt, so that we might clean the stain and end up having to repave the whole road. So we don't recommend using any kind of a pressure washing treatment on that type of an issue.
You ought to try magic erasers.
How
Ms.
big,
Campbell.
how big of an area are we talking about?
You know, I'd be just guessing, but I think the trail went for maybe a couple of 1,000 feet through the subdivision, something like that. I'm not sure.
So a couple of 1,000 feet would be about a half a mile?
Be about, well, yeah, probably less than that then. Probably more like
Yeah,
a
'cause
quarter mile.
A mile's 5,240 feet.
Right, maybe closer to 1,300 feet.
Okay. So a quarter of a mile. So, but we kind of, this board kind of said that we wanted to, from what I remember of the meeting, that we wanted to, staff to,
Yeah,
to clean up this spill
I did.
on this private road. It's not like it's a county road where, you know, they own the road, and they, I mean, this is something I think we told him we wanted it clean, so I'd like to see us try to do something to get this man's road clean, or this subdivision clean, but we may also need to think about a policy of what we do on these private roads, because I know, I mean, I'm thinking right now, in your district and mine, we've got several road subdivisions that have private roads. I mean, we're, you know, I don't want to open floodgates, but I do want us to think about, you know, what we do when this happens. So at this time, you know, I'd like us to try to get it up if at all possible.
Did you want to respond, Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Yeah.
The board asked us to reevaluate, and that's what we did. We reevaluated the situation. We did try, you know, what we could. It has been ECUA's policy where if there is a claim on a private road, that on our sanitation routes, that if we pay a claim, then we just stop serving that private road. Customers bring their cans out to the public right of way, and we provide service at that point. So, you know, those are issues that the board might want to consider, but it would have a major impact on our sanitation service.
Thank you. Dr. Alexander?
Yeah, I was, I'm not really comfortable, you know, with the fact in terms of what we've done up to this point, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because that gentleman came in here very humbly, quite frankly, requesting from us, even in spite of his frustration on his road, about it being cleaned up. Clearly, you know, we left a mess there, right? And what I did not realize until a moment ago, that this stain is far larger than I had imagined. Now, in my mind, I was thinking it was a big stain in the middle of the road or something, but if it's a quarter mile long, that's pretty significant on a private road, and I'm quite sure them people are concerned about the aesthetics of their neighborhood. And I certainly do hear you loud and clear, Mr. Walker, but my suggestion would be that if we can't, with the exception of maybe putting some chemicals, trying to get it up that way, if it damages the road, maybe, and I don't know if anyone has reached back out to him or their homeowners association. Here are the possibilities of what we can try, but understand it could damage the road. then they may say, well, we don't want to do that because we don't want to create a secondary problem for ourselves either. But I'm not, but I think we need to make some effort. The other piece is, too, it sounds, what it would appear somewhat vindictive to me, Madam Chair, if we were to say to them, well, just bring your stuff out to the edge of the road so we don't have to go back in there. If we're leaking stuff all over the place, then we got a problem we need to fix. But I think that we need to take a couple other steps instead of just concluding that this is over with. But I would recommend we reach back out to him or to his homeowners association. We can come out, we can try to pressure clean it, possibly, or maybe do a small sample pressure cleaning in some part of the road. But if it appears as it may do damage to the road, we'll stop. We've done everything, exhausted every effort that we could in good faith. And then at that point, let them continue on legally or whatever they feel that they need to do. But that would be my suggestion to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. Dr. Walker?
I share Mrs. Campbell's concern, and I like Dr. Alexander's suggestion. I think a quarter-mile stain it's a lot of stain. I wouldn't want it in the streets in my neighborhood if I could help it. And incidentally, I don't think it matters whether it's a public road or a private road. If we mess up a road, I think we ought to try to clean it up. I do know that there have been streets where we have made a truck has left a long stain of hydraulic fluid usually, and we have sent men out there with brooms and I don't know what, but they made an improvement, and they showed that they made an effort, that Ecua made an effort. And I don't know, maybe this is another place where we need a policy or a policy change. It seems like we don't have a policy on this, because I know we've done it both ways.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Ms. Campbell?
Yeah, I'm finding out that there's a lot of policies that aren't written, but I at the same time, I don't want to get us in a place where we don't need to be with, a lot of people spill peanut oil put oil in the trash as well, and that oil, if that gets compacted and squeezed out, like you called it peanut oil. Are we sure that it was peanut oil and not, that was my one question. Are we sure it was peanut oil and not hydraulic fluid this time?
Madam Chair, my understanding is the truck was checked. There were no hydraulic leaks of any kind with the truck. It was determined that it came from the bed, and the information I have is yes, it was peanut oil. It was the week after Thanksgiving. We assumed somebody was frying turkeys or whatever.
Yeah.
Our crews, as I understand it, did clean up the liquid like they would typically do with hydraulic fluid, the liquid portion that was, in the road or whatever. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about a stain.
And I'm just following up because mine works different. It works in a legal manner sometimes. Do we document when we go out there and check the road? Do we document or check the truck? Do we document all that it wasn't hydraulic fluid? When we have that truck checked, do we cover ourselves by?
I would have to double check, but I believe so, yes.
Okay. And then if we ever were gonna try something, like pressure washing or anything like that, I wouldn't want to do that without some kind of indemnification from them if it messes up their road. That we would be responsible, because I don't want to pay to pave anybody's roads. It's just something for us to think about going forward. I don't want to change policy right now, but I think that we have certain that this was not hydraulic, that it was peanut oil. I do want us to try to get it as cleaned up as we can. And then maybe we do need to set a policy about oil on the streets for the future, so maybe our staff could help us work on a written policy with Robert's help on oil in the street, and make sure that we're documenting properly when we do check those trucks so that we can cover ourselves. Thank you, Bill, for chasing this to.
Dr. Walker?
Madam Chairman, perhaps we need to have a representative of the sanitation department make another appearance before us and tell us what the staff's working policy is regarding spills, because obviously we don't know.
Mr. Perkins? Oh.
Yeah, I think we ought to have a representative of staff show up out there and clean the damn thing up, is what I think. You know, I mean, you know, we're not able to set a policy for every operational item that occurs in an organization of this size. You know, we've got people that come to us, they tell us there's a problem. It's our job to be responsive to that within, you know, parameters, within basic policy parameters. These people came last week. The man was very courteous, very professional, you know, and the people have resources out there. I mean, you know, that's an area that can tie you up legally if they need to, you know. And if I was them, I would. I'd be pissed off. I wouldn't care whether I won or lost. I'd give us hell. And the chairman of their county over there, the board chairman, I read today in the newspaper, you know, said he was basically, people were dissatisfied with our service. Well, I can see why, you know. I mean, we need to do better than that. And I've talked about, you know, sometimes I feel like there's a lack of a sense of urgency in our operations here, culturally, you know. And my opinion of what we had done at our last meeting after we had processed all this was that we were going to make an effort out there, that we were going to go out there and do something, at least try. And I don't get the sense that that happened. I get the sense that, oh, the guy was nasty to us, mean to us, and we were mean to him, and so we didn't do anything. Just forget about it, you know. And I don't care if it's going out there and just putting a whole line of dishwashing liquid down the street and getting one of those broom things that go like that and trying and doing some pressure washing. I don't think you're going to tear the street up, pressure washing. I mean, you use common sense. If you see it makes a little dig, then stop and do that. But at least make an effort. And to me, it doesn't look like we made the effort that we should have. And I think we need to be more responsive than that. And I think as board members, we have to, you know, and I'm not rallying against staff. I mean, we have a great staff and everything. We're in transition. But I think we need to hold people accountable, just like the voters hold us accountable. And yeah, they're not our voters over there, but they are people and they have real needs. And the right thing to do is when you mess up something like that is to try and fix it, you know. And so I still think we should do that. It may be too late, but I think we ought to go out there and at least make an effort. And I think if the people out there saw us making an effort, whether it worked or not, it would make a big difference in how they reacted. But I suspect that what's going to happen now is that they're going to send a letter to Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson's going to give the letter to Mr. Beasley. Mr. Beasley's going to start billing us hourly for that, which, yeah, it's your job. You know, I mean, you would expect that. And then they're going to start billing their attorney hourly, and then one side's going to win or lose, but we're going to have way more cost incurred whether we prevail or not than we would have if we just tried to clean the thing up. So that's my rant for today. But I thought we had directed staff to try and go out there and clean it up, and I'm hoping that that's what will still happen, regardless of whether it's too late or not.
Dr. Alexander.
And I agree with Mr. Perkins wholly. And, you know, here again, I don't know about how to do this, but this conversation that we need to have some follow through to it. And we need to go back out there, contact that gentleman that came here, or the homeowners association, make an effort as best we can again to try to clean it up. And once we do that and we can't, we're able to document that. We're able to show, should we have to go to meet them on the courthouse steps or whatever the case may have to be, at least we can show here the real efforts that we made. And we're able to document that. And if we can clean it up, that'd be great. But if we can't, then we know we have done everything that we can do. So, Madam Chair, I don't know how to and you'll have to direct me. I don't know whether to put that in the form of a motion or what, but there need to be some follow-through on this. Because in the next board meeting, quite frankly, what I need to hear is that this issue has been resolved, the road has either been cleaned, or it's just totally impossible to be done, and we've documented that, because we're gonna need that may need that in our defense later on.
Dr. Alexander, I think staff hears us, but I think a motion would be appropriate in this case.
I make a motion that we do, that we go back out to this community with contact with the homeowners association and/or the gentleman that came here, make every effort to try to clean it up again and to pressure wash. And if we see we're doing some damage, to stop at that point, document that, record it, because we don't want any unnecessary consequences that may come along of trying to clean it up.
Okay.
I don't know how to shorten that, but that's pretty much my motion.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I second the motion. Yeah, but I think Robert wants to.
Let's see, okay, do you need to go before Vicki does? Did you want to respond?
Only that the motion as worded would be to direct the executive director to take those actions and direct staff accordingly. He had said we, and I think he had intended to say that the executive director, and I just wanted to make sure that was clear on the record.
Yes, we can only direct the executive director. Thank you. Although, we're pretty sloppy about that. We typically say staff sort of globally, but,
Yeah.
Ms. Campbell?
I was just seconding the motion.
So as I understand the motion, it's basically direct staff to make every reasonable effort to clean it up.
Precisely,
The executive director.
yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Campbell?
I was just seconding the motion.
Okay, all right. Okay, please vote.
I want to see the executive director himself out there cleaning it up.
He's thinking about May 1st.
He's thinking about May 1st.
And it passes 5-0. There must be a website that can tell you different substances that typically are spilled on roadways and what chemicals to clean them up. I mean, the internet has all kinds of information about that. It would be interesting to compile that list of chemicals so that in case of spills, we can react quickly. But anyway, it did pass. Mr. Johnson, I think you're continuing your report.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Last Friday, we had a garbage truck at the Perdido landfill roll over. And fortunately, our driver is okay. This is the third rollover we've had out there in the last 9 months. When the county's transfer station is open, we have the less need to send trucks out there, but typically after we bring our loads to them on Wednesday, they close down for the rest of the week. They can't handle it. We are very interested in constructing our own transfer station and are diligently working on that. But these types of rollovers, besides just the plain danger to our employees, if the frame has been on this, we're looking at about $250,000 in cost. So just need to give you a heads up on that. That's all.
Mr. Johnson, I had a conversation with Ms. Gilley today about that issue, and she was not aware of that rollover. I think we have an opportunity to discuss a number of moving parts regarding this. This is just not one incident.
Right.
This has been an ongoing problem with that transfer station, and I think there's an opportunity to work with the county to find some interim solutions as well as long-term solutions. My board's on fire, so let's see. Mr. Beasley and then Ms. Campbell.
I just wanted to add an additional piece of information that I was out day. I was out of town, but I did receive contact from the county administrator's office to have a meeting about 3 different subject matters, to include the county transfer station, the water bill issue that's ongoing with the county, and then also the Godwin Lane proposed transfer station. So I have not set that meeting. Our offices are in the process of setting it. I just wanted you to know that the county had reached out through their staff to have a meeting with me about those 3 subject matters, and I just wanted to add that information.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Ms. Campbell?
And I have been talking with my counterpart, Mr. Burgash, at the county commission. He met me on the property, and Mr. Kiles took us around, showed him the entire property. He was under the impression that the property was in a subdivision, and so he was very happy to see that it was not in a subdivision. I don't know if y'all have been out there, but basically you see our property in the back, Pine Forest on the left, with 2 commercial properties. He did ask that I go back and speak with them. We have a little pond there between that I think, has some concern for them. But, and then on the other side, you literally see cow feet when you look out there, or animal, because it's a pasture. So I think he felt better about that when we looked at the location. And he did call me this week and asked me to go by and speak to those 2 commercial folks again. I have spoken to them once, but I will go by and speak to them again. So I do feel like there's a willingness of the county to relook at this.
Okay, we come now to the attorney's report. Thank you, Ms. Campbell, for that update.
I have no report, thank you.
Okay, under unfinished business, we have new grinder pump policy. That's you, Ms. Campbell.
So we received information about a new policy on the pipe sizes for the low pressure grinder pumps. I don't know if everybody got that this week in the board report, and of course I've had a couple of calls. I think I enjoy the spirited discussions about setting policy and good policy, and we have policy for lift stations, new subdivisions, and what developers have to do for the sewer there on new subdivisions up on the website. And unfortunately, when a developer starts a project, he looks at the costs that are associated with the project and then makes his plans. Part of those plans are to get funding in place. If you're looking at the policy that's on the website, and then you go get your funding in place for that type of policy, or you've spoken with staff and they tell you that a low pressure system will work in your instance, and you go looking at that low pressure system and what it's going to cost you with the standards that are up on our website or the standards that are in place, you proceed with that amount of money in mind. And then if we change that policy in the middle of that process, we can't have a moving target for a developer who's in the middle of building something. And so if the specs change, it's one thing, but if we change policy, I think it's another thing. So in this instance, it's not our policy, it is the county and the city who came to us and said that the Florida Plumbing Code says that we have to do such and such. I will say that in Rarity Island, we are not going to be following this policy, but in another subdivision that a developer called me about, he was in the middle of his subdivision, and these will affect him. I would just like us to think about in the future, when a policy changes, that we allow the folks that are already in midstream with a development, if they've already come to us and they have their funding in place, that we have a grace period. Otherwise, they're going to be hitting a moving target all along. So it's just something for us to think about. I don't want this new policy to get us caught, and I've already had one person call me about an ongoing that's going to have to change. Now, I've been told by staff that it's only going to be a $10,000 more, and so I haven't spoken to him since that, but if it's only a $10,000 more for an entire subdivision, doesn't sound to me like a big change. But it's just something to keep an eye on, that if we are gonna change, maybe we should have a policy that, and things do change. I mean, codes change all the time. But if someone's in the middle of a process, so just for instance, if they came right now and told us on Inverarity Island, the project that we have, that we had to change to 2-inch pipes on every single one of those, it would up that it would up that another $1 million. And so it's just something to think about. I mean, if you're in the middle of a project, you've already got it approved, I think you should have a grace period, or if you're even in the planning process, because a lot of times you don't have your plans handed in to staff yet, but you already have your funding in place and you're moving forward. So maybe I don't want to open end. I don't want somebody to have a year to decide, ooh, they're going to change policy. I need a year to go do this. Maybe a 90-day grace period, so that they have a chance to, if they're working on something, get those final plans in. Just something to throw out there for thought.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Walker.
Madam Chairman, I had placed an item under new business, developer proposal or something like that.
Yeah, we're still on unfinished
Right.
business. Right.
Well, it's the same.
Okay,
It's
okay.
the same topic.
Okay.
I wish to support what Mrs. Campbell said. I think that I don't know all the practices that have occurred, and perhaps the board needs to be informed. But if it's true that we say, oh, by the way, developers, here's a new policy you've got to comply with beginning today, to me, that does seem unfair. And it's also, one project is not likely to wind up costing us $1 million down the road. Although Mr. Johnson may beg to differ with me on that. And that would be fine. I would like to know more about this, whether this is a problem, whether we're being unfair to developers by imposing changes in our construction code overnight, or essentially on short term. I don't know just how short term they might be imposed. Perhaps there is a 3-month warning period. I don't know, but perhaps I think we need to be informed as board members more about the process through which changes are made in our construction code, and we impose them on people, developers who are in the middle of big projects. And I would ask maybe that you consider asking staff to, the executive director, to enlighten us somewhat on what we're doing there.
Mr. Johnson.
I guess,
Madam Chairman, I didn't necessarily mean
His
today.
light was on. His light was
yeah,
on, so.
I did. I guess first I would say that once we issue a plan approval letter, we don't back down. We accept whatever has been approved as approved. And if it's like the contract for Inverarity Island is out, and it's a fait accompli basically, and for a development project it's the same. The way I look at this particular issue is it is a technical specification that's changed. I don't see it as a policy really. We're basically saying to match our specification with the Florida Building Code, that where our specification called out an 1.5-inch line, that a 2-inch line should be put in. So it's basically the material cost differential between an 1.5-inch and a 2-inch line for the service line for grinder pumps. And it's basically from the main to the property line. It's short on one side, goes under the road little longer on the other side. So in this particular case, again, and this is just my perspective, it's really just a change in the technical specification. It's not a change that we sought. It's a change that we identified when we were made aware that the Florida Building Code essentially requires the homeowner's plumber to run a 2-inch line up to our connection point. So to correct that problem going forward, again, from our standpoint, it's a change to the technical specification. And in this particular case, you know, we threw out a number of, but I don't imagine the cost is significant in any project like that. You know, again, to us, the issue of the plan approval letter is where we commit. We basically say, here's your plan approval letter, here's your approved plans, you know, and specs that go along with it. Go forth, you build this, we will accept the lines in the right of way and do all those things just as it's approved, you know. But until we issue that plan approval letter, there may be things that come up, or there may be things that are unique to a project that might require something a little different. And it just happens. That's just the nature of building and work. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion. I understand, you know, that, you know, we all need to be fair to our development community in terms of how we treat them. But in this case, to me, it's a technical change that we were kind of led to that wasn't really of any of our making. It's just something that we've got to do now that we know about it.
Thank you. Ms. Campbell?
Yeah, and I want to be perfectly clear. I'm not really upset about this one instance. I just want us to think about when we are going to make a change in development code or policy, that we get in front of it and talk with the people that it's going to affect, and maybe give them a 90-day grace period of sort. You know, just let them know, hey, 90 day, you know, this has come up, and, you know, from now on, we're going to have a 2-inch pipe versus a 1.5-inch pipe, or 3-inch pipe versus a 2-inch pipe on these type of things. So if you've already got your plans in 90 days, I know you've been working on this one subdivision. If you can get them in 90 days, then you'll be grandfathered in. Otherwise, this is our policy going forward. So, and I do know that, you know, hey, we don't build houses anymore with 100-mile-per-hour wind, and that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing for us to change codes, and if the Florida Building Code changes, that we shouldn't keep up with it. We should. I don't want to build shacks while the rest of the world, but at the same time, I also don't want to harm someone financially that has their plans in place. They have been working with us for 6 months on this subdivision, and now all of a sudden that we want to change the specs on it. So just want to, communication is the key to success in every aspect of life, and I just want us to communicate well with the developer community.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Dr. Walker?
Madam Chairman, for some further clarification from Mr. Johnson, if I may request it. Once an approval letter, that's a plan of construction that we approve, they submit to us and we approve. Is that correct? And when does that occurs before they start any kind of groundwork or construction?
Mr. Johnson?
That's correct. They submit proposed plans to Ecua for their project, subdivision or commercial development or whatever. We review those plans, see if they're consistent with our technical specifications and our engineering manual in general, engineering design. And when we identify things that we think are not in compliance or we think should be done differently, we notify them, they make those changes, they resubmit to us, and we typically issue a plan approval letter. And that basically says your plan is approved as it is at this point in time, and you may go forth and construct.
And we don't impose changes on them, on that project thereafter.
That's correct.
That's great. The task that they have of raising the money, of borrowing the money, basically, I suppose, that generally proceeds by a long time, this plan, approval of a plan. Is that your understanding?
Well, to me, you know, that's something, that's one of those risks of being a developer, is you have to try to account for and anticipate your expenses. If you're trying to anticipate your expenses on what your construction costs are going to be for your water and sewer lines, you kind of need to have that plan approval letter before you know exactly what those future costs might be. So
if they raise money prior to getting that approval, they're engaging in some hunches and guesswork and.
Again, to me, it's just part of being a developer. You have to do preliminary cost estimates, and we do it as engineers. When we do an initial project that we want to bring to the board,
right,
we'll have a general idea of what we want to do, and we will put a number on it. But we don't know until we do the design and get into the details, and then frankly go out to bid what the actual cost is going to be. So, same thing to me.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Campbell?
So I think on the subdivision that you and I are both talking about, what happened was, you know, the gentleman told me that he had been speaking with staff, and I know he had because there were a couple of other issues that came up prior, because he was thinking about buying some property across the street or something, if it's the same one I'm thinking. And so he'd been working with staff for several months on the subdivision when this change came up, and already had in mind that he could work with the 1.5 and 2 inch pipes. And then all of a sudden this change came up, and he was told, yeah, well, but going forward this has been changed, and now it's going to be 2 and 3 inch pipes instead of 1.5 and 2. And so I'm fine with changes, but I don't want to be a moving target. And I would like, if we see something like this coming, it's not going to hurt us to say, hey, in 90 days, we're going to move to this new code. That 90 days to me gives them plenty of time to get those plans on through. If they've been working 6 months on a deal, you know, getting everything in line and getting things in place. In this one instance, the guy told me his engineer was on vacation, would be back that next week, but he didn't think he was going to get his plan in before this came up. So, you know, that's all I want, is I want to communicate with them and say, you know, this is coming. Maybe not just change it overnight. Give them 90 days as before we change any kind of code or plan. But
So we've sort of belabored this, but let me just say that I would also want to ask why the code change. If there's a good reason for the consumer for a code change, then we ought to be advocates for the consumer too,
Right.
not just for the developer. And I would assume they don't just change codes willy-nilly. Maybe they do, but you know, it's a complex equation, and boy, I'm certainly, it's above my pay grade to determine which of those is where. But I think our staff does a pretty darn good job of working with these entities and saying, yeah, that's reasonable, and we can be flexible here and there. So
I agree, and I think the reason this change came about was due to grinder pumps being used more. And in South Florida, I could see where they would never want a grinder pump. They have problems that we don't have up in this area. And so my sentiments are, I don't want grinder pump at all. I personally am never gonna buy a house with a grinder pump, but if you're gonna allow them on an island and not make any changes, it's not gonna hurt to give somebody 90 days north of 9 Mile Road time to get those plans in if they've been working on them for all that time. That's my only thing is, I just don't wanna, I don't wanna cause people more money. Dale talks about it every day. We want affordable housing. Every time you add, even if it's 10 grand, if you add a grand or 10 grand, every time you turn around, it's just gonna cost more. So I don't wanna do anything with this. I just want us to keep our mind on it, that we don't wanna make expensive changes without giving somebody 90 days grace period.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell, and I have you next for what we still have customer service phone lines that somehow we bumped. Do we have a staff report for this? It's listed, customer service phone lines. Okay, moving on to commercial customer online application, I think, Ms. Campbell.
It's online payment method. So this is the second time I've had this instance come up where a commercial customer wanted to go online and pay their bill. They're trying to pay us $3,000. And the online has a little button that says, pay your bill now, pay now. If you push the pay now button, it takes you to a portal where you're supposed to put in your information. So they go in and put in their bank information, all of their routing number. It asks for the routing number and the bank number and this and that. And they push the button to proceed and go forward to pay the $3,000, and it will not allow them to pay $3,000, only allows them to pay $500. Right. And so both times, in both instances, the person that called me said, well, I tried to call customer service and they told me if I wanted to pay, that I would have to make it in increments of $500. And then each one of those is charged $1.40 for a fee. So I want to pay you $3,000, and I got to take the time to pay 6 different $500 payments. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And I got to pay $1.40 every time. Now, it was explained to me today by John that there's an alternative to that, and it's not very visible on the website. To which I replied, well, then we need to make it more visible on the website. Well, I went to bill pay and asked for that, and they don't want to change it. I just want to make sure that everybody at bill pay knows that I want to change this. I never want a customer to think that they can't push the pay now button and pay us $3,000. I want them to be able to pay us $3,000. And this is the second time it's happened to me and it's not even in my district. Quite frankly, I don't have a lot of $3,000 customers on the west side of Pensacola, but I think that might be changing with all this growth that's going on. Both of these came from, I want to say District 4. So they're both coming from another district. I don't mind helping people at all. I love it. And I never say, I'm not your district rep. I do sometimes say, just so you know, your district rep is so-and-so, and I know that he or she would agree with me on this. But I let them tell me things because then I learn what the issues are. And this is an issue that I just can't live with. I would like us to resolve it as soon as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Dr. Alexander.
Yeah, how hard would it be to resolve this? Would that be a new software program? I mean, what does that require?
Can we ask Mr.
In order
Dunn
to do?
come up?
First time I've heard of it, so I'll have to check with our staff. And I know John's out here. He might want to address it as well, but, I think there's several different pieces to the puzzle.
You're recognized, Mr. Don.
So there's a couple of issues in play. The $500 limit is on our credit card processor. And they put a $500 limit on the transaction, and they charge $1.42 per transaction as a fee. And that fee is very low. Normally credit cards are 3% or something, but they only charge $1.42. And because they charge $1.42, they put a $500 cap on the transaction. So if you want to pay by credit card, you have to do it in $500 increments. And that's a contract that we're in with the Cuba. The company's called Cuba. On the website they call it Easy Pay, but it's a contract that we're in, and that's the part of the contract. If you want to pay by bank draft, then you can just pay the amount you want to pay, and the bank will draft it, pull it out of your account, and it'll be taken care of. But if you want to go through the credit card system, it's a $500 cap.
So,
Go
a
ahead.
question,
Sure.
Madam Chair.
Sure.
When will this contract end?
I believe, and I want to look at Patty, I think we renewed it early this year, last year, for a year, and with one more year extension, because what we're going to try to do is when we get finished with the Munis ERP system, is then go out and find a new processor that'll work more integrated with our new system that we have, and then make it seamless, and maybe get a better deal than $1.42 and a $500 cap, all the business rules around credit card processing. And so we'll tackle that next year when we get done with the Munis project.
You know, that might be something, Madam Chair, when these businesses call, because there are certain parts of the county that is growing. And people do a lot of their business oftentimes on the American Express business cards in which they pay bills or they buy supplies or whatever the case may happen to be. I think it's really antiquated that as the county is growing, we're still in this place of you can't charge. I mean, people want to pay their bill. That in itself is enough for me to say we got to do something different in an urgent kind of way. So I would like to see some urgency around this. And even if we're in this contract right now, we can't do anything about, at a minimum, at least let customers know who may call that these opportunities, it may be some other opportunities in the future. And what is it that we can do, just basic customer service, what we can do to help accommodate this for you. Bank draft is one of those things. But we're looking at going to a more modern system sometime here in the immediate future. And then when that time comes, I would suggest before we sign off into another contract, that whatever recommendations are made for how we pay, you know, how people will be able to pay us, we have an opportunity here at the board to hear what those are, so that we don't find ourselves operating in the 19th century.
Which we have been.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to do with financial transactions and customer payments that we all agree need to be upgraded and streamlined and much more customer friendly.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Ms. Campbell, did you need Mr. Don again?
No, I'm not finished.
Okay. Okay.
I update my website on a daily basis because things change on a daily basis. It doesn't take a lot to change a website. I think that in the interim, we could put a big star that says pay with a credit card here or pay with your bank draft here. And that seems to be the problem. They are clicking on the one button down at the bottom, so they go on. I'm going to send what I got today to staff and ask them to send it to all of you so that you see what they're doing. There's a button at the bottom. If I go on ABC Liquor Store or whatever I am, at the bottom it says pay now. And the person is clicking that button. They send it to me screen by screen by screen by screen by screen. Pay now. So they push the pay now button, and it asks them through this cubic place, whatever, what is your bank routing number, your blank, 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 your blank. You put all that in, and then you go to the next page, and you want to pay $3,000, and then it kicks you out and says, and then they think, well, I've done something wrong. So they go back in and do it all over again. There's nothing that tells them when they go to that page, if you're paying with a bank draft, you need to go over in this spot instead of this button. So I just think we need to make it clear on the website for now until we get the upgrades done. And I think that would solve everything. I sent you those, so, I think that would help in the meantime.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mr. Perkins?
Yes, so some of that's in our control, some of it's not. We could put something on there that says, pay with your, your banking account for free. Or, when you press pay now, it says pay with your banking account for free, or pay with a credit card for $1.45, per 500. But in the meantime, could we call our vendor and say, hey, look, man, we've got people trying to pay $3,000 bills, and they don't mind so much the $1.45 per 500, but they don't want to do a half an hour a day to input to pay 6 times. I mean, the vendor can probably have one line in the code of the thing. It's real easy to change, the limit up to 5,000 or something rather than 500, but they may not even be aware of it. I mean, can we contact them and say, hey, we've got this problem, can you make it easier for us?
Well, they negotiated it that way so that the fee would be $1.42.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
the fee is not the problem, it's the data input. If we could call.
But the fee becomes 3%, right? So if you have a $3,000 bill on your water, you want to run it through your credit card, that's a 3% charge. That's $90, a fee. So it's either that or, 5 or 6 times $1. So it's the deal that we made with the credit card company to keep the fee as low as possible. And that's why they put the cap on it. If we remove the cap, the fee will go up. So it's a deal that we made with the processor. And that deal was made, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. How long have we been working with Kubra?
Might be time to look at that
Yeah, it's
contract.
been a long time that we've been working with them.
I just want to make something perfectly clear. My person is not paying with a credit card. I've said that 100 times this week. They don't want to use a credit card. They want to use their bank draft. But the online button takes you to the credit card. It doesn't take you to the bank draft. It takes you to the credit card portal instead of, there should be maybe 2 buttons there. One button that says credit card and one that says bank draft, so.
Let me
Ms. Shelton?
just add, if they want to do it through the bank draft, they have to set it up through their bank. When you go to Pay Now, it takes you to the Kubra page. So if they want to pay by bank draft, they can set that up through their bank, or, if they're a business, they're going to have some sort of ACH process probably through their bank that they, like we do, we pay people via ACH, and they can set it up through their bank to do that. So they don't even have to go through Kubra or Easy Pay, they just do it with their bank. And then there's no charge to do it, or whatever bank fee their bank might charge.
That is the way that I do mine. But businesses, for some reason, don't want to do that. They want to just go on there and pay. They want to put their information in our system and just pay their bill. Kind of like they do with Gulf Power. So if they get a Gulf Power bill, they can go in and pay $3,000.
But we don't currently have a platform to do a bank draft on our website. I think that's,
Well, we can in
What
the
we're saying.
Click to Gov portal. Customers can set up their own bank draft.
okay.
Right.
But
Yeah,
we have to have a way to get to Click to Go.
Right. Yes, there you go. That's what we need, is something telling them where to go to Click to Go. There's nothing there pointing them in that direction.
There is on our website, on the same page where you go click to pay your bill. If I remember correctly, the credit card one is on the right and the Click to Go one is right below it, which says like you can review your account and all those things.
She reviews her account. The lady that's called me today reviews her account online and then tries to use that Click to Go, puts in all her information, and it says that you can only pay $500.
Right.
So even if they're taking it out of their bank without a credit
Well, it's
card?
because they're clicking the button, the Pay Now. The Pay Now pushes them over to the credit card processor.
That's
Because
what
you want to pay it now. When you do the bank draft, it doesn't go now. I guess it's kind of confusing from one perspective.
Yeah, it is, because if you're looking at the page, all you really see is the Pay Now. I want to pay my bill, and then they go down there, put it all in. So I get it. I think we could make it easier. If the
yeah,
Click
probably
Now, we just need to make it where the Click Now is more of an option on that page.
Well, I'll have a look at the website with Natalie and with Sherry that maintain the website, and just see if we can make it more clear, add some language.
Yeah,
And see
yeah.
what we can do to point people better in the right direction.
Thank
I
you.
mean, we have 30,000 people that use the Click2Gov website, and they pay their bill, they do the bank
Yeah.
drafting. So, we have a lot of people that use it, so we know that it works and it's intuitive.
Yeah,
But so, yeah, maybe pointing from the website, we'll have a look at that and see if we
Okay.
can make it more clear.
perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Don.
Thank you.
Dr. Alexander?
Yeah, I would just like to say, Madam Chair, whenever this contract, I want to know when this contract is over with this current company we're dealing with. And then I would like someone to be able to present to this board what are some alternatives in the future that we can use that will be more appropriate to this day and time. We're living in a very changing community, so what we did 10 years ago ain't working. And if you got people who are trying to pay their bills, we need to be trying to collect it in the most efficient way as possible.
Well, just not making people.
All these contracts we have optional renewals, not automatic renewals, and so if we're experiencing difficulty, it might be worth looking at it rather than just automatically renewing it.
Yeah, this one doesn't automatically renew.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thank you for taking my phone calls and all those emails this week.
No problem.
Dr. Walker, did you want, have we covered your item on unfinished? Okay. All right, I have no other items. We come to board communications, and I'd like to say something. We've been a little bit cranky today. We had a lot of not fun issues, but I want to just pause and celebrate what we just did today. We ratified a contract for a new executive director. It was a long process. Everybody engaged and studied and thought it through, and I think it was a wonderful process. I particularly want to thank staff. When you're having a change at the helm, there's a lot of anxiety at every level because you don't know what that change is going to be. And I think everybody in the staff has pulled together to keep this ship not just afloat, but functioning very well. And I particularly want to thank Mr. Johnson, and you're not finished yet, by the way, but I don't think the ECUA has missed a beat during all of this process, and we just need to pause and congratulate everybody involved. So thank you for everyone for being part of this. Ms. Campbell.
I'm so happy that you said that, because I made a prayer, but you didn't call on me. And part of it said that today is Shrove Tuesday. Some people call it Fat Tuesday, but it's Shrove Tuesday, which is the beginning of the Feast of the Epiphany and culminates the day before Ash Wednesday. And I think it has a different meaning for different faiths, but for me, it's always been a reflection of the past and a celebration of the new. And I think it's ironic that we approved that contract today. And I think it's going to be a good first step for this utility and for all the people that work with the utility and the citizens that we represent. I think it's going to be a good one.
Mr. Perkins?
I think a good move early on was to hire an outside professional search company. I think we need to, send Colin Basinger a good thank you note. They were very dedicated throughout it and accommodated all our needs, and certainly let them know that they come with a great reference from ECUA for future work.
By the way, Colin was helpful in the negotiations for the contract, too. There were questions about, is this within the right range and so forth, and he was as equally responsive during that phase as he was at every other phase. Okay, we are adjourned. Happy Mardi Gras, everybody.